So is there a difference between Southern design, Midwest design, New York design, and how do you determine what fits? I've always been curious about that.
The most important thing has to do with the architecture, and like you let the architecture dictate what you're going to do aesthetically. So like in New York, you have mostly buildings if you're in New York City. So it's very likely it's a 50-50 split. There are people who like very traditional maximalist styles with a lot of molding and old fireplaces and stone everywhere and ornate furniture like you would find in those buildings that are 300 or 400 years old. But then there's also the people who are in lofts or in these skyscrapers that are very modern and clean, and they have like this very minimal lifestyle. In the Midwest, it's more about practicality, and things tend to get more popular in the middle of the country a few years after they are popular in coastal cities. Okay. So you tend to find much safer, less taking risks, less risk-taking interiors in the Midwest, but they're usually very family-oriented. They're more simplistic architecture. And then there's the South. The South is so strange because architecture plays a huge part in it, especially in Atlanta and also in Savannah, and then also in New Orleans. And you usually take your cues from what would fit the architecture aesthetically. So like in New Orleans, you have like the really tall porches and very skinny houses and super high ceilings. And then also you have this lifestyle where things are super humid and there's a lot of rain, the summers are brutal. So you don't necessarily spend a lot of money on outdoor furniture because it's gonna get totally ruined. So you're a little more practical there. In Atlanta, it's kind of a combination of the two because we are a big city, but we're also in the South. So I think a lot of the classic Southern homes don't use a lot of color. Same thing with New York. I think New York tends to be a little bit more, less is more. That's the difference. That's what I love about New Orleans. Like you will find salmon colored houses in New Orleans, purple houses, green houses, pink houses. You experiment there. In Atlanta, I think we're changing because most of the interior designers who I idolize who are here, who are like the biggest names in the business, they don't use a lot of color. They pay more attention to architecture and the lines of the furniture. I think the younger generation, the Gen Xers and the millennials like myself, we're kind of bridge the gap. We like the idea of a few things that are modern, some vintage, something that's funny and playful in a very serious room. So I think what's really cool about living in Atlanta is you get the mix of New York and also the practicality of the Midwest, but then we also have the touch of the South. So that's why I like it here. It's got all these different things coming to the table.
Well, you told me that you have a room painted my color of the dress.
I've had several. So what you're wearing is, interior designers would call it Klein blue. And it has to do with this artist. I don't know if it was the 18th or the 19th century, but his name is, I think he's a French artist named Yves Klein. Yeah, Yves Klein. And it was called Yves Klein blue. He would take these busts and he would paint them this very particular shade of blue that was like 50% purple and 50% blue, which is midnight blue, which you're wearing. And then it became internationally known as International Klein blue. And it is the perfect mix of blue with a lot of purple undertones. When I first bought our house in South Buckhead, I painted the entryway that color. Then I redid what is going to be the night nurse's room in our house and did it that color. And now I came really, really close to finding wall-to-wall carpet in that color. I know, it's nuts, right? Because our house is pure white, like we talked about before, like the white floors are eventually going to be beige or brown because we're gonna have little feet with mud on them all over. But there's something about the Klein blue that you're wearing. It's never been super popular in the South, and I use it like a mainstay. So from now on, like when you see what you're wearing, like similar to that, there's a scene in The Devil Wears Prada where Meryl Streep is saying that it's not blue, it's called cerulean. She's like schooling Anne Hathaway's character on it. There's all these different types of blue. But you are technically wearing what interior designers call Yves Klein blue.
Well, how do you go about updating your house? Because my mother kept everything the same. And when I look at my house, everything is the same the way it was when I moved in there 10 years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
I think you're doing it the right way. I think what happens is right now we have these three generations who are all getting ready to buy houses or move into houses at the same time. We have the older Gen Zs, we have the 40-something millennials, and then we have the tail end of the end Gen Xers like myself. And we're all out there getting out of apartments, or at least trying to, especially the younger generations, trying as hard as they can to get out of renting. But I think what happened was there was a huge disposable furniture era that happened probably, I would say, in the early 2010s. I think when a lot of millennials were finally getting their first apartment and stuff like that, they bought stuff. There was this whole movement called normcore. It's like you were wearing mom jeans and white shirts.
Yes.
Everything was just basic and high top sneakers. They were practical with not a lot of style. Yeah. I think what happened is during that time, people started to buy super disposable furniture, which was good for the moment, but probably wouldn't last more than 3 or 4 years. I think because the pendulum always swings the other direction. I think that now all three generations have gotten together and it's like, you know what? I want to buy that sofa that has these super beautiful timeless lines that I can recover 20 years from now and pass on to my kids. And then same with that piece of art. I'm going to invest in doing a really beautiful frame around it. And also, I don't want to spend $25,000 on a rug, but I have this one for my grandmother. So I think now the money is spent on the changes, like changing the wall color, or all of a sudden maybe you have maybe there's a light fixture that the house came with that was kind of builder grade. You're going to upgrade that. I don't think people right now are necessarily buying things that they're just going to have temporarily. I think they're looking at, instead of spending $700 on a sofa for a year, they'll spend $3,200 on a sofa that's going to last for a while. I kind of like that because it goes back to the way that your mom probably decorated. Like you had things that everybody kept forever, and that's where the personality comes in, you know?
It's funny because I have pieces that belong to my mother. I didn't keep all of her furniture, but I have pieces that were really special to her that I have in different parts of the house. But you're right, I also have, a Queen Anne dining room table and chairs that I have had since 1967. And it's solid cherry wood.
There's no reason to get rid of that.
No.
Why would you? It's never going out of style. The only thing that's great about stuff like that is you can give it your own personality by recovering it with fabric, which is
and that's what I've done.
And it's not cheap.
No.
But it keeps those. It's so nice to have a piece, like pieces of furniture that you can keep for centuries. And also, like, it's yours. It has family history. And there's also something to be said about a few practical pieces as somebody who's about to enter parenthood. I think there's space for everything out there. There's space for the big box stores. There's space for the antique stores. There's something in the middle. But I like the idea of intentionally thinking of every single thing that comes into the house, why it's there and what purpose it serves. I think that it allows you to figure out exactly what you want the room to look like and how it's going to function. I think if you just buy stuff on the weekend because it's on sale, you might regret it.